Okay, I saw an incident yesterday. As I say, I had a disturbing incident happen on the bus whilst I was with my daughter yesterday, who's 16, and she was pretty shook up about it. We were just out for an afternoon when halfway through the journey, loud music was being played at the back of the bus by a bunch of lads, which is like a common thing anyway. And I kind of passed comment on how annoying it was to my daughter. I could hear another passenger further back having subtle dig at them too. At one point, I heard someone playing Scottish band music to counteract their musical pollution, which I thought was quite funny. Even felt like joining in with some prayer music or something, but I didn't. This is how intimidating this music was, playing through someone's phone. I just thought it wasn't worth it, so they carried on. I could hear this other passenger and them having a bit of a minor standoff against each other because it was annoying. It's usually like the kind of black rapper kind of music with it changes from week to week. You get like one talking about like a woman's intimate parts, and then like it's like muffling talk. Anyway, then the next minute, the back passenger came towards the front of the bus and fell on me and clipped my leg as he went down, which hurt quite bad. We were in the front seats and he was dazed. And I said, "Do you want some help up?" And he started to get aggressive because I think he felt humiliated. And he was a bit dazed as well. Turns out to be a white man from the back of the bus with his dog. It might have been the one that was having a go at these lads. Then I helped him up and he was wobbly but okay. The gang of lads were poking fun at him and went downstairs. He went downstairs and fell a few more steps along the way with his dog. Now these bunch of lads, whom, by the way, were multi-ethnics, were at the window as he got off towards us and said, it's not worth taking him. And they were going to punch his lights out, basically, for just like voicing his opinion about the music. This is commonplace these days. Then they made their way up further towards the bus, towards me and my daughter. We were the only passengers on the top deck. Now it's two females on their own with about 5 lads intimidating us. And they started initiating an intimidation ritual of pointing their bodies towards me and her being loud. So I pulled myself together, knowing this could lead to some kind of incident, and just started generally talking to my daughter as if what just happened didn't happen, just ignored them. I did feel intimidated because I thought, oh God, where's this going to lead? And it seemed to diffuse the situation after a few minutes. Then I started noticing how they went stone quiet, like guiltiness had set in, especially with the one lad. They just were stone quiet. I was wondering whether the action of me getting him to his feet made them think differently about the situation. I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but they did go quiet after that point. And then God said it was symbolic of men in this country had to be lifted up by a woman via God to get him to his feet. This is symbolic of the state of mankind in this country. This poor lad looked like he was on some sort of drugs. That says in V2K, could be opioids. He was there, but he wasn't. This is where men have been brought to on their knees because God has been lost in our country. They've been worked on and been stripped of their true menship, demasculinised. And I know this because I've watched my brother slowly decay over the years, where he's told to be a cleaner and then he gets jobs that are like part-time, intensive and humiliating, and then like he spends his time like an incel in his own flat, can't meet women and like can't go out with anyone, can't build a life, can't have his own home or anything, or he wanted to be a musician, and every time he's tried to be a musician, just like closed doors all the time. So this is the kind of thing that men, like they can't even afford to have their own families, where we're at. Especially like the white men, English men of this country, which, are the new criminals, but they're not criminals, they're good, decent men, but they've just been kicked into the ground, like myself. The incidents also brought my actions into question, that I even had to pick a man off the floor. He was so light, like he was not 9 stone. Carrying all that heavy shopping paid off all over the years, so I had the strength to lift him up. You know, it might have even been that, you know, the shame that I had to look after that guy. Carrying all that heavy shopping, as I says, paid off over the years. As a woman, being made to be self-sufficient just like my mum was, and being forced to handle situations with men like this all the time. I thought, what the hell is it coming to when I am before a man? You know, is to protect a man, you know, like, and get him up that way, and me not being able to look to anyone. A woman against an aggressive man. You know, there's a black driver that was driving the bus. I think he was an immigrant, and you know, like, it makes you wonder whether it would have helped me or not, because I've been in situations where they've ignored it. You know, can't do anything, or they've just drove off. You know, like, this brings into like questions of like, you know, like multiculturalism and stuff like that. Are they there for each other? Are they there for a white person? You know, this goes back to this, you know, mercy seat that's been taught to us via Christ. You know, like, just because they're like different multicultures, they don't have it there. You know, like those lads that, you know, they've probably got Muslim backgrounds, and they don't have that mercy seat, you know, like to lay your life down for another, you know, that comes natural to, you know, like most, you know, the white end of this country, because, you know, that was where it was placed in the past, and like, it's been so demonised, you know, like Christianity and white people, you know, it's just beyond dumb. I'm not saying that all multi-ethnics don't have that. I think the more British they are, the more they have that installed, and these lads, you know, like, they did stop and think in the end, and their command of English was quite good. That lad was as much as a victim of this modern twisted anti-God mindset as much as I am, and I'm sure that his drug use had a lot to do with his stance on feeling useless as a man. You know, as I say, I got this impression he was getting aggressive towards me because he was getting double humiliation, you know, like me helping him up and these lads laughing at him. He probably doesn't have job prospects, doesn't have a girlfriend, probably some kind of hermit, no value to society, just like I am. I had another incident on the way back home where a Muslim woman was putting her feet up on the window ledge at the front, being loud on the phone with a prideful arrogance, which from the law of averages I've seen quite a lot within the last year or two, coming from this ethnic group. And what I have seen isn't pleasant. As I say, I've seen like a white guy dragged into a road and kicked by multi-ethnics. You know, like the tensions are real between, you know, them. And I know that Muslims are getting set up to be arrogant and superior. You know, luckily for the bunch of lads that were on the bus, they backed off and quietened down, which means they have some sort of common sense. After all, it was only a little qualm of music being played too loud, and the overreaction and arrogance, that white guy should be beaten up for voicing that. And even me, you know, like, God wants it back to a point like what it used to be. I remember like walking on flowers, you know, and I got told off by an old lady, and I had respect to back off, although that was over the top. You know, you wouldn't dream of beating them up just for telling them. You actually had fear for these elderly, you know, like, because they knew better. You know, even though you didn't like it and you was burning inside, you know, like, you have that kind of respect for someone else. You know, you don't go beating people up just because they disagree with you. The problem with these social bubbles is they can get into a poisonous mindset where all their sense of logic and balance can get skewed, especially if you are getting poison dripped into these bubbles from dangerous individuals who have an agenda to cause social division and new regime changes, and not necessarily for their benefit or anyone else's. When I was writing this, God made me pull my hoodie over my eyes, and he says, "Let the judgment commence." So it was like over my eyes. And I think in some ways it's to do with the Muslim race that are in this country. And and other ethnicities that don't have respect for our culture. As I say, you know, like that woman had her feet up, you know, which is considered very rude in our culture, you know, to put your feet up, and it's a challenge. You know, they're not familiar, you know, with respecting anyone here, so, or our ways, and like God doesn't like that. In other words, this nation has been under such oppression that he is going to see to it that the lion will rise again. These boys had no fear on their hearts at the time they was persecuting this guy. Where is that from? They had no respect for another person's point of view to their behaviours. They've been accommodated in their packs to be obnoxious to the put to the reset of us. Don't know what that means. No, it seems just because they pack together in their mindset that they are invincible. But what they don't realise that when God starts moving in people's hearts, as in the God of Moses, they will start fearing God. I think that with this example yesterday, God works on many levels, and it's not always punishable, you know, like through fists and stuff. This is the bit that blows our minds with God. At the time of that incident, although a bit scared, I knew that God was with me, but I didn't know how he was working it out. The fact that they went quiet and backed off showed that something mysterious happened. This is what I call the mercy seat. Anyway, God made the sun shine extra bright through the bus. He's always playing with the light fader when he's pleased.